Are you looking to optimize your health? Are you looking to get the best supplements at the lowest price? For high quality supplements and to talk to someone about what supplements are best for you, go to takeyoursupplements.com and one of our fantastic true health coaches will help you pick out the right supplements for you that are the highest quality and the best price. That's takeyoursupplements.com. takeyoursupplements.com. That's takeyoursupplements.com. Be sure to ask about free shipping and our awesome referral program. Welcome to the Learn True Health podcast. I'm your host, Ashley James. This is episode 167. I am so thrilled today. We have with us one of my heroes when it comes to holistic health and natural medicine and really going against the grain as to everything that we were raised with in terms of the food pyramid. My family and I went gluten-free about 6 years ago, and it was a month after Dr. William Davis's book came out, Wheat Belly. And I have to say, when I read his book, I felt so vindicated because everyone that I spoke with was calling me a quack for going gluten-free. And now, 6 years later, everyone knows about being gluten-free. Dr. Davis, you have been at the forefront of this movement. You've helped thousands and thousands of people to regain their health by coaching them to stop eating grains. And today, finally, you're on the show to share with our listeners why doing something like cutting out grains could drastically improve their health. So happy to have you on the show. Welcome, Dr. William Davis.
Oh, I'm glad to be here, Ashley.
Thank you so much. Well, I'd love for you to start by sharing your story. I mean, you are quite famous, so many of my listeners have probably already heard about you or read your book. But for those who have never heard of you, could you share your story and what led you to discover that grains could be at the root cause of all of our modern day health problems?
Actually, I stumbled and bumbled my way here, but among the big things I tackled years ago was after my mother died of sudden cardiac death. She had a two-vessel angioplasty on her coronary arteries, uh, and then about 4 months later died suddenly after presumed successful procedure. And that's what I did. I didn't do my mom's procedure, of course, but that's what I did in Milwaukee. I worked in the cath lab. I was very busy. I worked morning till night, putting in stents and doing angioplasty and atherectomies, those kinds of procedures to open people's arteries. And this is the disease my mom died of. So it drove home to me that procedures were a lousy way to deal with this disease. It dealt with the acute episodes like heart attack or sudden cardiac death, but it didn't prevent them. And it's not nice to put people through these kinds of invasive procedures. So I got some people together and we got a device called an electron beam tomography. This is 20 years ago now. And we started scanning people's hearts that yields something called a coronary calcium score. And it tells you how much plaque you have, not how much blockage you have, which is kind of an outmoded idea. It tells you how much plaque you have. It would be like having a foot of, say, iron pipe. And rather than saying there's 50% blockage in this pipe from rust, I would say something like in this foot long length of pipe, there's 231.73 cubic millimeters of rust. It's a quantification of the atherosclerosis lining arteries. That's what this heart scan did. So people are coming through, many thousands of them, and they're kind of freaking out because they have so many people had silent heart disease. And 20 years ago, the only tools we had were a low-fat diet and statin drugs. So that's what we did. But it became clear, we helped publish some of the data, it didn't work. It does not work. It has a trivial effect on the growth of plaque. Plaque grows at the rate of 25 to 30% per year. It's horrible. It's terrifying how fast this stuff grows. And even high doses of statin drugs reduce that to something like 24%. In other words, hardly anything at all. Likewise, low-fat diet and some of the other conventional answers. So I had to find answers. Nobody had answers. My colleagues said, just don't scan people again. Don't get another heart scan score because you'll frighten them. And just deal with the heart attacks and chest pain as they developed, which is a miserable answer. So I set out to find better answers. Well, many people don't know this. Among the most common causes for heart attack and coronary disease, atherosclerosis, this thing we track in heart scans, is an excess of small oxidation prone LDL particles. This is often called high cholesterol or LDL cholesterol, which is what I call the kindergarten version. The real version is an excess of these small, very oxidation prone LDL particles. Well, only two classes of foods cause those particles. This is quite solid, not my research, but this is from University of California, San Francisco, and Berkeley, Hopkins, and some other places. Only two foods cause the formation of small LDL particles: grains and sugars, with other rare exceptions, but it's grains and sugars. So I asked my patients to remove grains and sugars from their diet, and they did. And small LDL values would drop precipitously. It would drop from something like 2,000, this is in nanomoles per liter, to zero or very low numbers. But what taught me a lesson, Ashley, was that people would come back to me. So I did this just for coronary purposes because of high heart scan scores and the prospect of heart attack in people's futures. They came back and they said, but you didn't tell me I would lose 57 pounds. You didn't, you didn't tell me that my ulcerative colitis would be gone within 3 weeks. Why is my eczema now gone? Why did my migraine headaches I've had for 20 years, 5 times a week, disappear within 2 weeks? Why is my acid reflux and IBS symptoms, why did they go away within 5 days? Why did my joint pain disappear? So you'd imagine, not expecting any of this, I don't know. But it happened so consistently in such a large number of people. I started sharing this with other people and talking about it online, and lo and behold, the same thing played out. And that's why I started to dig around and just try to understand what this was all about. And that's that whole process of investigation, understanding, trying to get my arms around the science, what agribusiness did to wheat and grains. That's what led to the whole wheat belly experience.
That's phenomenal. So you were coming from the standpoint of, okay, we have this plaque, it's this silent heart disease, a silent killer. Well, what is the plaque actually? It's actually the small LDL, low density lipoprotein cholesterol, this very specific type of cholesterol. Well, what causes that? And you looked into the research and saw sugars and grain cause it. And so you said, okay, all patients get off this food. And then that's when all the results started coming in. So it's really results based.
Yeah. So there's actually lots of things in plaque, and the deposition of small LDL particles is really part of it. There's other things. There's
Mm.
various fats and cells. There is cholesterol, but cholesterol is not the cause. Cholesterol is more of an innocent bystander in this process. It's used as a marker. It's a very crude marker. It's very unreliable. Cholesterol actually is incredibly outdated. But it just so happens it makes oodles of money for the pharmaceutical industry. So they managed to perpetuate this semi-fiction called high cholesterol as a cause for heart disease, when cholesterol has nothing to do with heart disease. It's simply a crude marker for the particles that cause heart disease. In this case, an excess of small. Well, now here's something that your listeners may want to know. It is incredibly easy to get rid of small LDL particles in the vast majority of people. I say vast majority because there's a small minority who have genetic variants that make it more tricky. But over 95% of us just say goodbye to all grains and sugars, and small LDL drops to the floor, and then you see all these other effects. From a cholesterol type of viewpoint, HDL goes way up, triglycerides drop, small LDL, of course, drops. LDL cholesterol is such a crude, unreliable value. It usually goes down, but can go up because many of the listeners might not know this. The LDL cholesterol they're given is actually not a real number. I call it a fictitious number. It's calculated from a very crude, outdated calculation from about 1960.
What?
Yeah,
Really?
it's
So
called the Friedewald calculation from the National Institutes of Health in Bethesda, Maryland.
So when we go and get our blood taken and our MD looks at our labs and says, "I need to get you on some statin drugs right now," it's an outdated something from 1960s.
Yes, but you can still smell the perfume of a good-looking, sexy sales rep who told that doctor to dispense the drugs that treat cholesterol. Yes, so I'm kidding with you, but so yes, the LDL cholesterol is calculated by something called the Friedewald calculation. It assumes that we all eat the same. It assumes we all have the same triglyceride value. It makes many crude assumptions that are simply not true. And when you change your diet, such as banishing all grains and sugars, you cannot depend on those crude assumptions. And LDL cholesterol becomes it's bad, it's unreliable to begin with. It becomes absolutely invalid when you follow this kind of a lifestyle. It doesn't mean you're lost. It just means you can't rely on this crude screening test called cholesterol test, and you have to go to the real test that's I've been doing for almost 20 years, and it's just a few dollars more, called advanced lipoprotein analysis, such as the NMR, nuclear magnetic resonance. And all that means we take your plasma sample, your blood sample, put it in an MRI type device, and it just subjects the plasma to this NMR effect, and it fractionates your proteins, your particles in your bloodstream. It tells you how much of the heart disease causing particles you have. But then it also gives you even better, incredible insight into what diet is doing to you. Not this silly measure called high cholesterol or the fictitious measure called LDL cholesterol, but the real, actual quantified LDL particles that tell you exactly where heart disease is coming from. But it was really all these other experiences actually that I started seeing the reversal of autoimmune diseases, headaches, neurological processes. Uh, uh, the list was literally hundreds of conditions long. To my great surprise, I was not the first one to make these observations. These observations had been made going back 30, 40 years. All I did was start asking questions, put it all together, and then also uh, I cultivated the conversation that a lot of this was magnified by agribusiness. Agribusiness is in the business of trying to increase crop yield per acre or increase pest resistance to insects and molds and mildew and rusts. So they've changed. I started the conversation with wheat because wheat is the most dominant and it's the worst of all grains. But wheat in the 1960s used to be a 4.5, 5 foot tall traditional plant, more or less. Now it's an 18-inch tall, high yield, short, squat, very thick, large seed head, which is called a semi dwarf strain, essentially created in laboratories and is very different. For instance, in order to increase pest resistance, they increase the content of something called wheat germ agglutinin. It sounds like gluten, but it's unrelated. Wheat germ agglutinin is completely impervious to human digestion, but as it passes from mouth to toilet, it exerts all sorts of toxic effects on the gastrointestinal tract. If you give a small speck, about a milligram, to a laboratory rat of wheat germ agglutinin, its intestinal tract is destroyed and typically does not survive. That's how toxic this stuff is. And the same kind of thing happens to lesser degrees because we're bigger in humans. And a little bit, by the way, also gets into the bloodstream. That's why many people have antibodies to wheat germ agglutinin because it gets into the bloodstream and the lymph system, and it causes white blood cells to produce antibodies. And it's highly inflammatory. The teensy weensy quantity of wheat germ agglutinin that gets into your bloodstream is highly inflammatory. I point that out actually because people have this idea that gluten is the problem. No, gluten's just one in a long list. Just as tar is only one problem in a long list of hundreds of compounds that are poisonous in tobacco. Same thing, gluten, or more correctly, gliadin in wheat and related grains is just one component among many other toxic components in grains. Because if people understand that, they won't make mistakes. Like I know you did this, and other people have done this until they heard the entire argument. They went gluten free.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't understand why. Maybe their IBS and their acid reflux went away, but they gained weight and maybe even became a type 2 diabetic. And their tummies got real big and their triglycerides went way up and their blood sugars went way up. And they had all kinds of gastrointestinal problems from the dysbiosis, the disrupted bowel flora. So if we think more precise about what we're trying to do and don't embrace the silly gluten-free message, you start to see the real truth here. But the positive message here actually is if people get this, they have the key to astounding health and slenderness.
I love it. And I love that you said silly gluten-free message because I did just that. I went gluten-free. I replaced all the gluten products with all the gluten-free products. And then so many people ask, is that healthier? I mean, we're now eating gluten-free bread, gluten-free pasta. Is that healthier than, or, gluten-free chips and gluten-free tortillas and wraps, gluten-free pizza? Is that healthier, or is that worse, or is that about the same?
The problems are a little bit different. So it would be like if I said, if I caught you smoking Marlboros, I said, Ashley, I don't think you should smoke those. Try these low tar filtered cigarettes instead. And then 20 years later, you got lung cancer and heart disease. In other words, so when you replace wheat and gluten with the gluten free ingredients, which are in 98% of gluten free products, that means cornstarch, rice flour, tapioca starch, and potato flour. So one of the other problems with wheat products is the amylopectin A carbohydrate of wheat is responsible for sky high blood sugars. Very few foods raise blood sugar higher than wheat products. The short list of foods that raise blood sugar even higher than wheat, cornstarch, rice flour, tapioca starch, potato flour, it's almost like a cruel joke. It's like they didn't do this on purpose. It's their ignorance. It's the food industry's ignorance. But they chose 4 ingredients that mimic some of the taste and texture characteristics of wheat and gluten and made breads and muffins and cookies out of these 4 ingredients. Well, that causes the highest blood sugar you'll ever see of any food. Cornstarch has the highest glycemic index, 100, higher than any other food known to man. So it caught those kinds of highly processed, high surface area, because they're dried and pulverized down to small particles, cause extravagantly high blood sugars, high insulin. It grows visceral fat, inflammatory fat around your tummy and around your organs in your tummy. It causes cataracts very quickly. It causes hypertension. It contributes dramatically to heart disease risk, type 2 diabetes, dementia, and cancer. These are very, very, very bad foods. So I always cringe when people say, oh, the wheat belly guy, he's about the gluten-free diet. So,
Oh my gosh, thank you for clarifying that. So really, I love that you emphasize that your message, although started as being gluten free, or sorry, I should say, started as being grain free. You said, wheat belly, grain free, and sugar free. People assume that that means just gluten, but what you're saying is that all grains and sugar together, um, doesn't matter whether there's gluten in it. That's just one, like you said, tar, but there's so many more problems. It's really this concept. It sounds like what you're saying is eat a whole foods diet.
eat a whole foods diet, and this is going to sound odd when you first hear it, minus the seeds of grasses. That's what
Mm.
grains are. They're all grasses. And we've known for decades that humans simply cannot, we don't have the digestive apparatus to break down the components of grasses. And that's why when you cut your lawn in the summertime, nobody saves the clippings to toss on top of a salad, right? I mean, that's been done, right? In times of war and famine, people have tried to eat grass, and these stories. People get sick, they throw it up, they have diarrhea and abdominal pain, severe abdominal pain, and the grass that comes out in your bowel movement is undigested. So we can't digest the blades of grass, nor the stalks, nor the roots, nor the seeds. So even though we don't eat the grass in our the Kentucky bluegrass or ryegrass in our lawns, that grass is very closely related to wheat, corn, sorghum, millet, amaranth, triticale, etc. Grains. They're all seeds of grasses. And humans are on it like that wheat germ of gluten we talked about. That goes in intact and comes out intact. It's still quite toxic because humans lack the enzymes to break it down. The gliadin protein is a component of gluten. We can't break down the single amino acids. If you eat an egg yolk, egg white, you break the proteins down to single amino acids. If you eat the gliadin protein of wheat, the best you can do is break it down to 4 or 5 amino acid long peptides or pieces. And by the way, those are the peptides that act as opiates on the human brain and have these opioid effects. It could be behavioral outbursts in kids with ADHD or autism. It could be the triggering of paranoia and hearing voices in a paranoid schizophrenic. It could be 24-hour food obsessions in someone with bulimia or binge eating disorder. Or it could be just provocation of mind fog and appetite in those of us without those conditions. And it causes most of us to take in 400, 800 calories more per day. The gliadin-derived opioid peptides are very effective appetite stimulants. It's my opinion. I don't have proof of this, by the way. It's my opinion. That's why starting around 1970, 1980, we started to see wheat, flour, and other grain components in every processed food, not just obvious places like pasta and rolls, but in everything from salad dressing to soup mixes to canned soups to seasoning mixes to licorice, everything. Almost every processed food now has wheat or related grain component. And I believe it's because smart food scientists in the food industry noticed that the changes in wheat, the gliadin protein of wheat introduced by agribusiness, turned it into a much more effective opioid appetite stimulant.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, like thinking about like that they put MSG in, Doritos, for example, and MSG being that neurotoxin that stimulates the brain to continue to eat and eat and eat and even have a memory of that taste in their mind, like they're going to crave it at 3 in the morning. So gliadin has that similar stimulus that as a junk food laced with MSG, is that correct?
Yes, and I tell you, actually, there's nothing better than the success stories I've come my way, many, many, many of them, of people who are absolutely incapacitated by eating disorders like bulimia and binge eating, who, as you know, they have low self-esteem, they hide their habits, they feel controlled by their impulses. These are the people who sit in front of a refrigerator at 3 a.m. binging, sometimes purging in the toilet. They had bad teeth from it. They have bad self-images because of it. Um, this goes away. It doesn't go away maybe 100%, but it goes away in a lot of people, I think the majority, just by getting rid of the gliadin-derived opioid peptides. So some really fabulous success stories from that area.
I love it. So many people who say they're gluten free will continue to eat oats because, oats don't have gluten. And I've been telling people don't oats have a similar protein to gluten. Is that the gliadin?
That's the avenine protein. And the protein of oats, avenine, is actually not that offensive, but not to say oats are safe because oats still have the amylopectin carbohydrate. And that's why, even though oats are labeled heart healthy, right, because of the beta glucan fiber, they don't tell you that oats raise blood sugar sky high. So non-diabetic people, normal blood sugar is 90 milligrams per deciliter or less. If you eat a bowl of organic stone ground oatmeal with no added sugar, a typical blood sugar after a bowl of oatmeal would be about 160, 180 in a non-diabetic, which is sky high and causes a whole cascade of health effects. In a diabetic, type 2 diabetic, a typical blood sugar after a bowl of oatmeal, unsweetened, is 300 to 500.
Oh my gosh.
So oatmeal raises blood sugar extravagantly. And those high blood sugars are not benign, in addition to creating insulin resistance that makes you gain weight and causes inflammatory visceral fat. It contributes quite quickly to formation of cataracts, deterioration of vision, deterioration of kidney function, risk for cancer, dementia, heart disease. These are not benign effects. And so you're right, oats are a real problem. So that's why I extended the original wheat belly conversation to include that of all grains, because the issue's a little different with each and every grain, but there's so many problems with them. There's no way to take a grain and make it healthy. Agribusiness tries to do that. They try to take this or that out, or try to make it less glycemic, or reduce some of the gluten content, but you can't, just like you can't make tobacco a healthy product, you can't make grains a healthy product no matter what you do.
Now, some people would argue, but they're in the Bible, but we've been eating them for thousands of years. I mean, this is what our ancestors ate. Can you help us understand, even though, our ancestors ate this and it's in the Bible, why would all grains be bad if we've been eating them for 2000 years?
Well, first of all, we are more closely related to a bonobo ape than modern wheat is related to the wheat of the Bible. So the genetic distance between the wheat of today and the wheat of the Bible is vast. So all humans have 46 chromosomes, and that's true if you're, regardless of race, regardless of what part of the world you're from. If it's 100,000 years ago, we all have 46 chromosomes. Um, uh, uh, Many of the great apes have 48 chromosomes, so they're pretty close related to us. Modern wheat has 42 chromosomes. The wheat of the Bible has 28, and the predecessor of the wheat of the Bible has 14. In other words, we're not talking about a little bit of difference, like a chimpanzee to a human with about a 1 or 2% difference in genetic code. We're talking about huge differences in genetic code. They are related, but they're very, very distantly related. The emmer wheat of the Bible, the einkorn wheat of pre-biblical times, is a very, very different plant. Now, we could get into a debate about whether those are safer, and I think they are safer, but they're not safe. There still was autoimmune diseases, for instance, in the 19th century. There still was type 2 diabetes in the early 20th century before agribusiness got in the act. In other words, these are not benign. We also know that when humans first, 10, 11, 12,000 years ago, the record is quite clear. When humans first added cultivated wheat and other grains, there was an explosion in tooth decay. Here's something interesting. Prior to grain consumption, tooth decay was very rare. 1 to 3% of all teeth recovered showed tooth decay or abscess formation or misalignment. People had mouths of full straight teeth their entire lives. Despite no toothpaste, no fluoridated toothpaste, no fluoridated water, no dental floss, no dentists, nothing. Maybe a twig to pick the shreds of the wild boar from between your teeth. But when grains were added, there was an explosion in tooth decay. We went from 1 to 3% of teeth showing decay to 16 to 49% of all teeth showing decay, abscess formation, infection, misalignment. We also saw an explosion in bone diseases and iron deficiency anemia. We see iron deficiency anemia in the bony record as something called porotic hyperostosis. In other words, when grains were added to the human diet, and added, by the way, in desperation, there was an explosion in human disease. This was true in Central America when we added maize, corn. It was true in the swamps of Southeast Asia when they added rice. It was true in the sub-Saharan section of Africa when they added millet. And it was true, of course, in the Middle East when they added wheat. So grains are something that you eat to survive another few weeks, but then pay a long-term health price. And that's why it's been tough to make cause-effect associations, because if I eat bread today, I don't get rheumatoid arthritis tomorrow. I don't get type 2 diabetes next week. I develop these conditions years later. Most conditions are delayed, but that's the price we pay for eating the seeds of grasses.
I hope you're enjoying today's interview with Dr. William Davis. We'll return to the interview in a moment. If you're listening to this podcast, you absolutely love health information and love learning how to gain health and love sharing with others, sharing with your friends and family how they can gain health too, then you might already want to become a health coach and not even know it. I joined the Institute for Integrative Nutrition health coaching program about a year ago, and I love their program. It's so amazing. In fact, Dr. William Davis is one of the many teachers in Institute for Integrative Nutrition's health coaching certification program. So if you've loved listening to Dr. William Davis and many of the other expert guests I've had on the show, so many of them are also teachers within the Institute for Integrative Nutrition's health coaching program. I would have just taken IIN's training just for my own personal growth, just for my own information. But I'm so happy that everything I've learned from them has also taught me how to become an amazing health coach. I look forward to integrating everything I've learned into continuing to grow this podcast and helping all of you to learn true health. If it sounds interesting to you that the idea that you could learn from, that Dr. William Davis could be one of your many teachers in a year-long program that's designed to be easily done even during a busy life. You can watch their videos on the road. You can do the coursework. It's about, I want to say, maybe half an hour a day. If you could do about a half an hour a day, 5 days a week, throughout a year, then you will become a very knowledgeable, very well trained health coach that is certified internationally and that has the ability to set up right away a successful health coaching business. In fact, halfway through the program, just about 6 months into the program, they teach you everything you need to begin to gain clients so that while you're still in their program, you can actively grow your health coaching business and help others to achieve their health results while still in the program, while still being mentored, while still being supported by the teachers. Isn't that phenomenal? It is truly amazing. I really love it. That is why I partnered with them and became an ambassador of IIN, because I want to get this information out there to as many people. I know so many of my listeners are really interested in getting into the holistic health field in one way or another. And in fact, a lot of our listeners, because I keep talking about how amazing IIN is, have joined the program and they keep telling me they love it. It is amazing. Now, if you are interested in IIN's health coaching program and everything I've mentioned, give them a call. You can just Google IIN Institute for Integrative Nutrition. Give them a call, mention that you learned about it through Ashley James in the Learn True Health podcast. They're going to make sure that they give you the lowest discount. In fact, that's my agreement with them, is that if they mention that they heard it from my podcast, you heard it from me, Ashley James, they have to give you the best price and they have to give you all the bonuses. So I just want you to know that I'm making sure that you're taken care of. And on top of that, I would love to mentor you, support you in your success as you go through the program, as you grow your health coaching business. I would love to partner with you and have you on the show and support you in any way I can. In fact, that's what I'm doing with a lot of the listeners who've joined the program, who've joined IIN's health coaching program, because I want to get as many health coaches out there. Let's really take this information and give it some legs, give it some feet. So if that sounds interesting to you, go ahead and give them a call. You can also go to learntruehealth.com/coach. When you go to learntruehealth.com/coach, you can receive a sample of their program for free. So you can go through a module and get an idea as to what their program is like. It's very inspirational. It's very educational. And if you really enjoy my podcast, you're going to absolutely love the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. If you're interested in more information, like their curriculum guide, their curriculum syllabus, and also their phone number, all of that I'm going to include in the show notes of today's podcast, so you can check that out if that's something that interests you. If you'd like to learn more, you can also listen to the episode I did with Joshua Rosenthal, the creator of the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. It's quite fascinating. He has IIN invest in lobbying efforts to protect the holistic health field and solidify health coaching, certified health coaches as a legitimate profession that is being recognized and respected. So it's so exciting. This movement is growing. In fact, health coaching is the largest growing career in 2017. It's really, really exciting. So for any more information, please check out the show notes of today's podcast, or you can Google IIN, Institute for Integrative Nutrition, give them a call, check them out. Or you can go to learntruehealth.com/coach and get your free curriculum guide and get the access to some of their training for free to see if it's something that would interest you. I would also love to answer any questions you have. Please feel free to email me, ashley@learntruehealth.com. I would love to help you in any way if this sounds like something that interests you. ashley@learntruehealth.com. Wonderful. Well, thank you for listening and thank you for enjoying this episode with Dr. William Davis. Please share this episode with those you love. he teaches something that helps to reverse so many diseases and to prevent so many more diseases. So, for all those that you love, all of your friends with blood sugar problems, weight problems, cardiac problems, skin problems, arthritis, pain. Just think of all those people that you love that are suffering needlessly, and please reach out to them and share this information with them. Just have them listen to Dr. Davis. He's the one that's going to convince them that there are things that they can do to drastically improve their health and do it in a way that's natural and nurturing to the body, and that they can get results by integrating holistic medicine into their life through diet and lifestyle changes. They can get the results that they desperately want. Thank you so much for listening, and enjoy the rest of our interview. Fascinating. Are there cultures or tribes in this day and age that we've observed who naturally eat grain and sugar free, and you can definitely see as that whole culture, that tribe, that they don't experience the same diseases we have in our modern day society?
Yes, excellent. Yes. Now those groups are diminishing; they're almost gone now. But we have very clear records going back 200 or 300 years of the people who lived hunter-gatherer lives, essentially Stone Age lives, hunting for their meals, fishing, crude farming, non-grain farming, digging in the dirt for roots and tubers, gathering berries and nuts, etc. These people, they don't have any diabetes. They have no heart disease. Cancer is rare. Dementia is unheard of. They have no skin rashes. They don't have rheumatoid arthritis. They're not constipated. They have no diverticular disease. They have no colon cancer. They have other problems, right? They have infections, infestations with worms, for instance, malaria and dengue fever, and injuries. So they have a different kind of health struggle than we do. But when these kinds of primitive people begin to trade with modern people, it could be for cornmeal or beer or wine or candy, whatever. There's an explosion, once again, tooth decay, arthritis, psychiatric disease, obesity, cancer, heart disease, and they get it worse than we do. So the 10,000 or so years that we have been consuming grains and sugars have allowed a partial accommodation to these foods, not total, just partial accommodation. These primitive cultures who've not had their ancestors accommodated to the consumption of grains and sugars are not accommodated at all. They're not adapted at all. And they have explosive, for instance, type 2 diabetes. That's why the Pima Indians, for instance, and some of the indigenous tribes in the Amazonian jungle, and some of the African populations and the Maori populations have worse type 2 diabetes, psychiatric disease, and other problems, even worse than even we do, because they don't have the partial acclimation. So very important. So I'll bet you some of your listeners know about Weston Price's book, Nutrition and Physical Degeneration, the dentist from Cleveland who traveled the world to try to understand tooth decay. And he chronicled 15,000 photographs of people who lived their primitive lives without grains and sugars, who had beautiful mouths of teeth, were happy, even the elderly. This is not true just of kids, but the elderly also. And then when they traded with Westerners, developed mouths of tooth decay, abscess formation, psychiatric disease, arthritis, cancers. The number one cause for suicide among these primitive cultures who start to trade with Westerners is tooth abscess. And that's because tooth abscess eats its way to the surface, which is extremely painful and causes many of these primitive people to kill themselves because they were eating Westerners' foods and didn't have the kinds of partial protections that we have, like fluoridated toothpaste and dental floss.
I find that so fascinating when I first learned about that these cultures who did not have any access to the agriculture that we have, and that they were hunter gatherer, and then we come over and we give them wheat and start trading wheat for their skins or whatever, and then all of a sudden suicide goes up mental illness goes up, infections goes up out of nowhere, from nothing, from no suicides in this tribe to all of a sudden noticeable, no mental illness ever observed in this tribe to all of a sudden there being a substantial amount of it. And the only thing that changed it was their diet, and it was greens.
And it's a striking explosion. It's not subtle. It's quite obvious to the people, the
Hmm.
sociologists, the anthropologists who made these observations. So, we've dealt well with infectious disease and injury. So the medical system is quite good at that. But it's been completely negligent in identifying grains as the cause for many chronic diseases. And these are common diseases we're all familiar with, like acid reflux, hypertension, high cholesterol, skin rashes, depression, etc. These are not entirely, but largely diseases of grain consumption.
About just about 5 years, still new to the being gluten free scene, and kind of excited about it. And I was in the gluten free aisle, and this woman looked really clueless. And so I offered my help to her. I said, can I help you find something? Are you looking for something? And she said, my sister in law is from the Netherlands. She's coming to visit. When she eats wheat or any, I think she said when she eats gluten, basically, so barley, wheat, and rye from America, she's so sick we have to hospitalize her. But she can eat grains in the Netherlands and be fine. Now, I mean, this was like 5 years ago, and I don't know if it's because of glyphosate, which is from Roundup. I don't know if it's the GMO. I'm not sure. But at that point, that was like a big light bulb and a question mark went over my head because I was like, wait a second. How could our grains here hospitalize her, but grains in Europe be okay? Have you come across this?
Um, well, we have to be careful here, Ashley. The lack of a perceived effect doesn't mean the absence of any adverse effect. There are differences in the what are called cultivars, the strains of wheat in different countries. So it could be that a strain, say in Netherlands, is a little bit different than the strain that's available in um, Canada or in the U.S. And we know that for a fact. There's 200 forms of gliadin, so there can be variants in individual response to gliadin protein. You make a very
Mm.
good point. It could indeed be a higher glyphosate content in wheat from the US. That could be true also. Though we have to be also careful because a lot of the wheat consumed in Europe is imported from Saskatchewan or Alberta or Kansas. And so there's a mixing of products also. And it's very difficult sometimes. That's why when you buy a loaf of bread, it doesn't say grown from wheat in Nebraska, or we don't know where the sources are. So it's very
Right.
difficult. But that woman needs to know that a lack of a perceived effect does not mean she didn't have any effect. So, for instance, the sky high blood sugars that develop after a bowl of pasta that lasts for many, many hours because pasta is compressed and it causes sustained blood sugars for a long time. She won't feel that. Yeah, she just added substantially to her risk for cataracts, hypertension, heart disease, cancer, and dementia, and dysbiosis, and autoimmune diseases. And she won't connect cause and effect because she might not have that for another 5, 10, 20 years.
I love the point you just made. That is exactly what everyone needs to understand because I know so many people that said, "Oh, I tried that gluten-free thing. I didn't feel a difference. I stopped eating, gluten for 20 days, and then I ate some, and I didn't notice a difference. So I can eat it again. I'm not allergic to it. I can digest it. I'm not celiac, and
Right.
that's not the point. It's like you said, it's like tar versus the 2,000 other chemicals in cigarettes. You might be able to notice tar because you can look at the filter and see that there's a discoloration on the filter, and you go, okay, wow, that's getting into my lungs. But what you didn't realize is that there might be 5 chemicals in the cigarette that is slowly accumulating, and 10 years down the road causes cancer or causes dementia or causes heart disease, like you said. So why do it? Why put your body through that when we know that grains and sugar cause unnecessary blood sugar spikes, and those blood sugar spikes and that spike in insulin have all these negative effects? Why do it?
Absolutely. And one of the most sobering observations is the initial observation I went after for heart disease purposes, and that is how easy it is to provoke formation of small LDL particles. If I eat, let's say, a pork chop, a fatty cut of pork chop, which is good for you, by the way. So I tell people, buy fatty cuts, eat the fat. It will provoke formation of large LDL particles. Large LDL particles persist for about 24 hours in the body, in the bloodstream, and then are cleared very effectively by the liver. So only 24 hours they persist. If I have, let's say, a bagel or 2 slices of whole wheat bread, it provokes formation of small LDL particles to very high levels, 1,500, 1,800, 2,000, 2,400 nanomoles per liter. So particle count per volume. And they last 5 to 7 days, sometimes longer. So that one exposure is flagrantly responsible for contributing to cumulative heart disease risk. It's not a little bit different, it's a lot different. And so I used to tell this to my patients who would say, I do this lifestyle, but every Friday I have 1 slice of pizza. It's my bad day. I'm okay, right? And what I had to show them was that 1 indulgence per week gave them heart disease risk 52 weeks a year because of the uncommon persistence of the small LDL particles. So very sobering. That was where I started this conversation many years ago. But it taught me just how awful some of the effects of grains were, even in people who had no awareness of it.
Have you seen, with all the tools that you have to look at blood and scan hearts, have you seen that this diet, you can see it, like, can someone completely get rid of plaque? Like their body can completely reverse plaque and a buildup in the arteries of the heart?
It can, but much more commonly, it just reduces. So like we talked about in the beginning, the typical history of a heart scan score is a 25 to 30% year over year increase until it results in heart attack or death or appearance of symptoms. I saw this happen many times. I published some of the data. Let's say somebody starts a high heart scan score of 800, and they do all these things. Now, there's more to this than elimination of wheat and grains and sugars. There's vitamin D, supplementation of fish oil, iodine, and normalization of thyroid status, magnesium, cultivation of bowel flora. These are the efforts we make to address the health disruptions initiated by grains and other common deficiencies, like iodine deficiencies, very common away from the coasts. So you take these simple steps, and someone would typically drop their heart scan score from 800 to 400 or something like that, a very dramatic and visible drop in the quantity of plaque in their arteries. But typically high scores like that didn't drop to 0. Now, I do wonder now, we've gotten much more aggressive at dealing with issues like bowel flora, dysbiosis, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. I do wonder, because we don't track heart scan scores vigorously as we used to. I do wonder if people are getting even further closer to 0, but I don't have any data to prove that to you. But when people do drop their scores from 700 to 300 or something like that, the event rate, that meaning heart attack, appearance of symptoms, need for bypass and stents, drops to virtually 0.
Wonderful. This diet sounds, what you're proposing, this diet, it sounds like the perfect blood sugar diet. Like you could have named your book Perfect Blood Sugar Diet and No More Heart Attacks Diet.
So, and you're right that if we're starting to experience perfect blood sugars, it means that the majority of people with type 2 diabetes no longer have type 2 diabetes. So I actually have to tell people to take their insulin dose, people who take insulin, and cut it by 50% in the first 24 hours if they take drugs that linger and cause low blood sugars, like glimepiride, glyburide, and glipizide. They have to actually stop it or cut the dose dramatically so they don't get low blood sugars, because they become much less diabetic almost immediately. But I've lost count of the number of people who've reversed their type 2 diabetes. And by the way, including myself. 25 years ago, I became a vegetarian, followed an ultra low-fat diet, because that's what I heard Dr. Dean Ornish talk about. And that's the stuff that Esselstyn and those people talk about now. I did it and was very serious about it. And I was jogging 5 to 8 miles a day. And I became a type 2 diabetic eating that way, eating and exercising that way. And I stopped that and I became a non-diabetic. I no longer have anything close to diabetes. But it's very easy. That's one of the things I try to impress on people. It is very, very, very easy to not be a type 2 diabetic in the vast majority of people. I talked to a guy just recently, took insulin for 16 years
Mm.
and several other drugs, as well as all the other stuff, blood pressure drugs, acid reflux drugs, etc., cholesterol drugs. And his doctor told him it was hopeless. He'd never get off insulin. He's going to be a diabetic for a lifetime. Of course, the insulin, insulin is a very effective weight gain drug,
Mm-hmm.
and it causes extravagant weight gain. And that's what happened to him. He did this lifestyle, as well as the other steps like vitamin D restoration, cultivating the bowel flora. And he is close to non-diabetic off his insulin, off all his diabetes drugs. He needs to lose more weight. That's going to help. But it's astoundingly easy to not have diabetes. Yet we have a world that likes that. That's the dirty little secret, right, Ashley? The world likes diabetes. By the world, I mean big pharma.
Mm-hmm.
My colleagues, medical device industry, the hospital industry, because it fuels their profits, their revenues. And even type 2 diabetes by itself is a $30 billion a year industry growing by double-digit percentages every year. It is highly profitable.
Mm-hmm.
But you and I don't want anything to do with type 2 diabetes. And the truth of it is astoundingly easy to not be diabetic.
I totally agree with you. I had type 2 diabetes and I reversed it naturally, in
That's
part by,
excellent.
thank you, in part by going, quote unquote gluten free. Of course, now I'm grain free for the most part. We do rice once in a while, but I'm pretty convinced at this point to cut that out.
That's great.
I feel like $1,000,000. I can't believe when I had diabetes, I also had chronic adrenal fatigue and a bunch of other problems going on at once. Because of course, it's we're not in a vacuum, so they treat the diabetes like it's the disease, but it's the symptom. And
Yes.
and all these other problems they had were all just symptoms. It was like they were treating the smoke when the fire was still going on. Um, and what I found amazing was that when we cut out all the gluten grains, um, my inflammation, I lost 25 pounds of water weight, not fat, water weight. I have a picture of before and after. Well, I have a picture of myself right before we went gluten free. It's my old driver's license photo. My husband and I got our driver's license, and then soon after we, read your book, and we'd tested out going gluten free, read your book, heard some interviews by you, and we were like totally sold on it. And then when we got our new driver's license photos, we compared the two, and it was amazing. My head, my face was so round. I couldn't believe how puffy I was. And within a few months of cutting out those grains, my ring, my wedding and engagement ring would fall off my. He would fly across the room every time I moved my hands, and my husband too. And my engagement ring is heirloom, a family heirloom. It's like 100 years old. I was very nervous about having it adjusted, but finally the day came when I said, "This is ridiculous. I'm going to lose my rings." So we went in to get them resized, and from just cutting out these grains, I'd gone down 1.5 ring sizes, and my husband went down 2 ring sizes. So in our fingers were inflamed. Every single square inch of our body was inflamed. We don't have celiac. We don't, you know what I mean? Like we don't have anaphylactic shock when we don't have this like
Right.
outwardly
Right.
allergy to these things, but we're just like regular people. We cut them out, and every square inch of our body got smaller, and because we were holding on to so much inflammation. Why do grains and cause, and I would say in particular wheat, cause the body to hold on to puffiness, hold on to this inflammation, that a lot of people are walking around and not realizing that they have wheat belly?
Isn't that something? Just how much inflammation? You lost 25 pounds of inflammatory edema. Water.
Yes, in my
That's
first
a
month,
lot.
it was a lot. And I
And
didn't
I
know.
see
I mean,
this.
I didn't know I had it. I could move my hands, I could move my joints. I
Mhm.
didn't know I had it. It just was like this amazing weight dropped off my whole body, and my fingers, which is just crazy because my fingers didn't look fat.
And people's, as you noticed in yourself, the face changes often dramatically. So
Hmm.
much so, I share these pictures on the Wheat Belly Facebook page, and people say you're finding a mother and daughter who, one and pretending they're the before and after. Of course, I'm not doing that. That's silly, but that's how dramatic the difference can be. Um, that the facial contours change, their cheeks deflate, the around the eye puffiness recedes, their eyes get bigger, they look different, and it's very common for people to say, Ashley, you look 20 years younger.
Mm-hmm.
In addition to being smaller and smaller ring sizes, smaller gene sizes, etc. Grains are perfect for cultivating inflammation. So gliadin is a very potent inflammatory protein. Gliadin-derived peptides are very potent inflammatory peptides to the intestinal tract and when they get into the bloodstream and organs. If the gliadin protein provokes an autoimmune process, which it does commonly, that adds to inflammation. Wheat germ agglutinin, like we talked about, is highly inflammatory. If you cultivate visceral fat in your tummy, inflammatory fat, from the high blood sugars, from the amylopectin A and the high blood insulins, that amplifies inflammation. And there's other factors in grains that trigger inflammation. In other words, it's not just one thing, it's a collection of things. So wheat and related grains are perfect, they're perfect storms of inflammation-causing components. The wonderful thing is, as you experience, when you remove this, inflammation recedes at this astounding rate. Here's a funny thing, some people get so scared by how rapidly I've had people say, I lost 30 pounds, including a whole bunch of water, and I peed like crazy, and then it scared me. When I lost 30 pounds in the first month, it scared me so much, I went back off the diet and started eating grains again. So, but it's a good thing. You know, some of my colleagues poo-poo this effect. They say, so what, it's just water. Well, that's not so. That's a very important observation. If you lose water, you're reversing inflammation. So getting rid of grains and as you know, inflammation underlies a lot of diseases, type 2 diabetes, autoimmune diseases, cancer, dementia, heart disease. All those diseases share inflammation as one of the causes that contributes.
You mentioned your colleagues. Why can't all MDs wrap their brain around this? Like, are they motivated by money? Are the pharmaceutical companies paying them off, or are they just really narrow-minded, or can they not understand and see these results and see this science?
Yes, and no. So, my colleagues, I went through the same training, the education training they did, and there's virtually no concern, interest in the science or the practice of nutrition, as powerful as it can be. Then once you get into practice, you realize it's about money. And imagine trying to persuade an ophthalmologist who makes $2 million a year and drives his Maserati because he makes those injections into people's eyes for macular degeneration that don't work. He's not going to stop and talk to people about having eye health. The rheumatologist who loves dispensing the biologic drugs that cost $20,000 to $100,000 a year, he loves it because he gets all kinds of perks from the drug industry, from the hospitals who allow him to dispense it, while ignoring the science, the published science, not my science, this is by other groups, that removal of all grains partially reverses rheumatoid arthritis. But it's not even on their radar because there's just a lack of interest and indifference to diet, because it doesn't come with a prescription, it doesn't come with a sexy sales representative, it doesn't come in a medical device package, it doesn't come in a hospital, it doesn't involve large charges. They just don't care. Now, I'm generalizing, of course. There are very, very wonderful integrative health practitioners, functional medicine practitioners, physician's assistants, etc., who do take an interest in health and recognize that 95% of conventional physicians are not interested in health, nor in nutrition, and many are corrupt. So that's what we're up against. And so that's why what you're doing, by the way, with your podcast, what others are doing with their broadcasts and our writings and our social media is so important. Here's something your listeners should know. Direct consumer drug ads that dominate American TV now has, in effect, put a gag order on network and cable TV.
Mm-hmm.
Because the morning news, the in-depth news reporting shows, no longer cover problems in healthcare. They cover healthcare politics, but not the problems in healthcare. The extravagant and now becoming increasingly crippling problems in healthcare, the extravagant profiteering and corruption in healthcare is not, no mention is made because the media are fearful of losing those advertising dollars. And so this triples the importance of what you're doing in these kinds of conversations because it's not coming from network TV, for instance. It's got to come from someplace if people want to know what's going on in healthcare, because you see what's happening. The injectable cholesterol drugs are now adding over $100,000 per person to annual healthcare costs. A 3-month course of hepatitis C drugs, a 120 tablet vial, is $84,000 to $94,000. And while you and I might not take that, maybe our neighbor takes it, our healthcare insurance bill goes up as a result of them taking it because it's healthcare insurance, of course, is a shared risk. And so that's what's happening, and it's not being reported. So it's so important we all have these kinds of conversations, whether it's about grains or sugars or fighting the American Heart Association and its silly stand on cholesterol and saturated fat, or the profiteering ways of the drug industry, the medical device industry. These are a very, very important conversation, actually, we all have.
Mm-hmm. I fully agree with you. I love that you pointed out that it's not, we can't be in a bubble. We can't sit at home and go, well, I'm going to, follow Dr. Davis and eat everything he says to eat, and I'm going to be really healthy, but I'm not going to tell anyone because
Right.
everyone else is they're on these drugs that are cost, like you said, $89,000, whatever it is, just crazy, crazy, crazy. And all the health problems, 1 in 3 people in America are diabetic or pre-diabetic. Now the cancer rates are ridiculous. It's almost 1 in 2 people in their lifetime will experience a diagnosis of cancer. And all of these illnesses, if you go down the mainstream path, you're going to be given lots of drugs, which cost so much money for the insurance company, make so much money for the pharmaceutical company, and all the procedures cost so much for the insurance companies. So the insurance companies turn around and charge me, who I eat whole foods, organic, I go to a naturopath, I take supplements, and I'm not on any medications, and I have to pay through the roof for basic and medical insurance because everyone else is sick, right? So for all the listeners who go, well, I eat healthy, we've got to make this movement. We got to turn this ripple into a tidal wave. We've got to get this information out there so that we can help as many people as possible, feel good about ourselves at the end of the day and help as many people help our loved ones. But if we affect a certain percentage of the population, we can start to make a real change, a real shift. Just look at in the last 6 years, there was, last 10 years, there's no gluten-free products out there. It's unheard of. And now it's this a huge factor in the market. The companies will respond to what we buy. So if all of us buy organic whole foods, in 10 years from now, if all of us, get off the medications we don't need to be on and start taking supplements and doing all the things that Dr. Davis says to get our health back, 10 years from now, all the companies will have shifted directions. They just want to serve us. We are in control. We have to vote with our fork. We have to put our dollars towards what we want and get enough people to do it with us, and the world will shift in our favor. I know that the pharmaceutical companies are going to go kicking and screaming and trying to manipulate the situation. You're right, they control the mainstream media.
Mm-hmm.
The quote unquote fake news is completely controlled by the people who pay for it. I heard this interesting story about how some local Fox channel in Florida was going to do like a 3 or 4 part series on flu vaccines and whether they're effective or not, and that got completely shut down before it was aired, and the 2 reporters were
Mm-hmm.
fired. They were fired and
Yeah.
gagged
Yeah.
because Fox is just like all the other news agencies are paid for by the pharmaceutical companies. So we will never ever from the mainstream get the real truth. We have to, like you said, it's got to be grassroots. We have to go and seek out experts like yourself to learn from. Now,
This is why, by the way, Ashley, I wrote the Undoctored book. And that's because I lost faith that mainstream medicine will come to our rescue and do the right thing. I don't think they're ever going to do that because there's no profit in it. As I often say, the enemy of healthcare is not sickness, it's healthy people. Because if you're healthy, you're useless to the healthcare system. But, we live in this age where people like your listeners are hugely empowered
Mm-hmm.
by listening to your podcast and similar types of broadcasts. They have an astounding capacity for collaboration online. It could be social media, it could be websites that collect people and put them together and allow them to collaborate on a project. It could be the new smartphone apps and devices. Just on my desk right now, I have an EEG device that helps me relax. I have a Dario blood sugar device that plugs into my smartphone and tracks my blood sugars for me. It's the size of my thumbnail. I have an Aura device that tracks my heart rate, my sleep phases. In other words, you and I have access to an astounding array now of health tools. And because I don't think the answers are ever going to come from John Q primary care or the specialty community, I want people to be empowered. That's what I did in Undoctored. I showed people how to take the reins of healthcare and not do almost as good a job in healthcare, but get results that are vastly superior. As you have personally, results that are vastly superior to what you would have gotten from the conventional healthcare system. The truth is, you can do a far better job than your doctor. There are times when we need the healthcare system. Car accident, tumble down the stairs, dengue fever from your trip to South America. But for the common chronic conditions, the truth of it is you do not need the doctor for most of these conditions. In fact, you get better results than they ever could have hoped for.
Mm. I love it. Now, you had mentioned some supplements that you encourage people to take: iodine, magnesium, vitamin D, EFAs. Do you have any levels that you recommend that we start with, or, in general? I know everyone's different, and maybe my iodine levels or vitamin D levels would be different from someone else, but do you kind of have a baseline, like everyone should take this much?
Yeah, what I did with Undoctored was I didn't say diagnose your own health condition, because that's hazardous. People shouldn't be diagnosing themselves. What I said was, regardless of whether you were labeled with rheumatoid arthritis or type 2 diabetes or psoriasis or migraine headaches or psoriatic arthritis or plantar fasciitis or whatever the diagnosis, the label put on you, do these 6 basic things in your health. And the overwhelming likelihood is that within days to weeks or months, in some instances, you won't have any of those conditions. And the label didn't matter. And so the basic menu of strategies in the undoctored lifestyle is just as in the wheat belly experience, the predecessor: no wheat, no grains, and cap net carb input. This is 15 grams net carbs per meal. Vitamin D restoration. And what I do is I advise a 6,000 unit oil-based gel cap to start, and then adjust future dose by the blood level of 25 hydroxy vitamin D, aiming for a blood level of 60 to 70 nanograms per milliliter, or 150 to 180 nanomoles per liter. Magnesium. Magnesium, a little tricky, but you want to get 400 to 500 milligrams of the magnesium itself, the so-called elemental magnesium, preferably from non-laxative forms of magnesium, like magnesium malate, magnesium glycinate, magnesium chelate. Iodine, I advocate 400 to 500 micrograms per day. Not the mega dose some people talk about, because I've seen too many people with iodine toxicity. Iodine is very benign if done properly. So the RDA is 150 micrograms. So I'm advising more than that, but never more than 1,000 micrograms. And we never see iodine toxicity at those levels. But also explore thyroid at some point, because thyroid disruption is so incredibly common. About 35% of people now have some kind of thyroid disruption going on. Fish oil for the EPA and DHA, not krill and not flaxseed oil, those different forms. Flaxseed, for instance, has linolenic acid, not EPA and DHA. Fish oil. I advocate a dose of 3,000 to 3,600 milligrams of EPA plus DHA total per day. That's the level at which Alzheimer's risk drops off, and risk for sudden cardiac death and heart attacks drops off dramatically, as well as other health benefits like reduction in cancer risk. And then lastly, the more complicated thing, that is cultivation of bowel flora. People hear that as a probiotic, and probiotic is just the start. There's several other steps to take. And, modern people have disrupted their bowel flora dramatically, often worsened by prescription medication, as you know. The acid blocking medicines are very common, completely screw up your bowel flora. That's why people who take these acid blocking drugs eventually end up with autoimmune diseases, colon cancer, inflammatory bowel disease, because they've disrupted their bowel flora, which permits high levels of inflammation to occur. But that's a little bit more complicated to cover in a few minutes. But it's, in a nutshell, it's a high potency multi-species probiotic coupled with fermented foods, which are very easy to make and cost nothing, and then prebiotic fibers. These are the fibers that you take that you can't digest, but your microorganisms can digest. And they come in some peculiar forms, like a raw white potato or green unripe banana or inulin powder. And these nourish the proper species you want. And they support you. They heal your intestinal tract. They reduce blood sugar and blood pressure and reduce triglycerides and deepen your sleep and reduce anxiety. It's a vivid illustration of the power of the bowel flora. But if we got the nation, even a tenth of the nation engaged in this very simple, it sounds a little complicated, but it's really not that complicated once you read the rationale and the how-tos. And you see hundreds of health conditions recede. You see people who've got low self-esteem, bad knees because they have a 46-inch waist, trimmed down to a 30-inch waist, and back in the jeans they wore when they were 22 years old. And you see people glowing with health, looking 10 to 20 years younger. Not because of drugs, not because of plastic surgery, not because of extreme exercise and going to CrossFit class. I'm talking about just by a shift in diet and correcting some of the nutritional deficiencies that develop from prior grain consumption.
I love it. I love it. Everything you said is so spot on. I'm on your website right now, wheatbellyblog.com, under the About section, and I'm seeing this beautiful food pyramid, the Wheat Belly food pyramid for total health. And it's funny because the first thing a lot of people say is no wheat. What am I going to eat? Right? What do you mean no grains? What am I? No sugar and no grains. That's everything. What am I going to eat? And so I'd love for you, could you do me a favor, share with us what is an average breakfast, lunch, and dinner that you eat? Can you give us some example plates of what you eat?
Well, one thing your readers should know is when they first go grain-free, there's an opiate withdrawal process. So they need to know that because they'll feel awful. Many of them will feel awful for the first week, but it's just a process you have to get through. And the books all discuss how to soften the blow of that process. It's pretty easy. You have to hydrate more. You have to use some salt in your diet, etc. But here's another thing. Your appetite drops dramatically. So this morning I was in Chicago and I was staying in a hotel, and I went down and had the buffet. I had about 3 scrambled eggs with some bacon and sausage, and then a few small pieces of fruit. I mind my carbs. And then I didn't eat till about an hour ago. So I ate at about 6:30 this morning. I ate again at about 5 p.m. And I had, I fermented half and half, 18% fat. So I want fat. I fermented it a few days ago. I whipped in some inulin powder and some blueberries. I had some of that. And I dipped some veggies in guacamole. That was my dinner. And that's all I'm going to eat till tomorrow. I'm stuffed. I'm not deprived. I'm stuffed. So I had breakfast. I had a light dinner. That's all I ate today. Those of us who are grain-free are miraculously freed from hunger, from habit. We eat when we feel like it. And I've done this many times, Ashley. I'll have, let's say, a nice big breakfast, a light lunch, and then I'll be working or doing something or occupied. I wake up the next morning and I'll say, I'm a little bit hungry. Why am I hungry? I forgot to eat dinner.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're so freed from appetite. And hunger even feels different. It's not the driving, incessant, desperate feeling that grain-consuming people get. It's a soft reminder, you should probably eat something in the next few hours.
Mm-hmm.
So life is completely different. The experience of hunger is completely different for those of us who've rejected all grain. So yes, it is about losing weight. It is about the extravagant reversal of inflammation. It's about being freed from hunger, but it's also about the complete transformation, the way you feel, the way you think, and the way you look.
I love it. And you have helped so many people make that transformation. Now, your undoctored experience, the inner circle, is that what you were describing? I'm seeing it on your website under all the different books at the bottom. It says undoctored inner circle. Is that what people could join if they really want to take their health to the next level in terms of not only cutting out grains, but all your advice when it comes to health?
So I took all the sum total of all wheat belly lessons learned and folded in many new lessons, including how to collaborate with other people, how to use smartphone apps and tools. That's the new Undoctored book. I called it Undoctored: Why Healthcare Has Failed You and How You Can Become Smarter Than Your Doctor. but we also built a website called the Undoctored Inner Circle, and that's for the really deep dive into health. So even though the undoctored, the sum total of the wheat belly experience with some new tools reverses hundreds of health conditions. What I can't say, Ashley, is that it reverses every known health condition. It doesn't do that. So, for instance, if you have osteopenia or osteoporosis, bone thinning, or if you had calcium oxalate kidney stones, or if you had some forms of complex lipid disorders, or if you're unhappy with your skin and joint health, even after doing the basic strategies, there are additional things you can do. And so I show people take these 2, 3, 4, 5 additional steps, for instance, for your calcium oxalate kidney stones. It's unlikely you'll ever be plagued by passing another painful kidney stone. Here are some additional steps you can take to lighten the wrinkles on your face, get smoother skin, more moist skin, protect yourself from further sun damage. Here are several other steps you can take if you're left with some measure of joint pain. So it's truly the effort to help people become empowered in personal health. But it's a membership website because it takes a lot of, we have a ton of investment in these sites. You know, websites are not free. People think they're free. They're not free. They cost a lot of money to do. So, and a lot of this was my own personal money, by the way. So we want to, and a lot of that money is going to be directed. I'm very mindful, Ashley, that I hear someone like you, a young couple in a family, who says at some point you're going to say, "What do I do? My healthcare insurance premium is $3,000 a month or $4,000 a month, even though I've taken action to be healthy." And I see my neighbors taking Enbrel, Humira, and those fancy drugs, but I'm not. Why am I paying those kinds of extravagant healthcare costs? Because it's a shared risk. Well, what if you and I could craft a way to opt out? What if we could opt out and provide those of us who've taken the initiative to be healthy, slender, younger, to say we're going to buy a form of healthcare insurance to provide for catastrophic care, but acknowledges that you are healthier and don't use the hospital, don't take drugs, don't take those biological drugs for $100,000 a year, and your healthcare insurance is going to be $500 a month or something like that. So part of the Undoctored Inner Circle project over time, it's very ambitious, it's going to take a long time, is to craft a process to allow people to opt out of the conventional healthcare system.
I am so right there with you. I know my listeners are. Please, when you get that going, I want to have you back on the show. I want to promote it.
Okay.
Absolutely. I want to be in on that. I want to help as many people because I cannot believe how much we're paying for health insurance that we're not using.
Yes.
We use our health insurance to go to our naturopath, to go to our chiropractor, acupuncturist, but that's pennies compared to what it my husband and I were just saying this the other day. If we had just taken the thousands of dollars we pay for our health insurance and just put it in a bank account somewhere, we'd probably been able to go to all the acupuncture and chiropractic adjustments we wanted and had some left over to pay for our supplements. And it's just, but I get it. We should have catastrophic. We should, we want to protect ourselves as much as we can. I like having the access to allopathic medicine when it's needed. I want it there. But I definitely don't want allopathic medicine all the time. I want your kind of medicine. This is wonderful. This whole like holistic Like, let's just get to the root cause instead of continually treating symptoms. Now, you have said some really interesting points about cholesterol at the beginning of the show. Do you have the stance that people should not be on cholesterol medication? Do you pretty much tell people that is the one drug that you shouldn't be on, or that is kind of useless? Or do you have a list of drugs that you say these are completely useless, they're totally money driven, and science has proven that they don't work?
It's a long list, actually. It's a very long list. Because when you think of it, we're given a diet by the USDA, the US Department of Health and Human Services, Health Canada, American Heart Association, American Diabetes Association, that causes disease. That disease could be called coronary disease or type 2 diabetes or psoriasis or rheumatoid arthritis. And then the doctors and the pharma industry and the medical device industry and the hospital industry come to our rescue. So they have a vast arsenal of very costly and very dangerous and only partially effective tools. Yet they never once said, could this be grain related? Could this autoimmune condition have occurred because you were so vitamin D deficient, it provided a permissive effect and allowed autoimmunity to emerge? Could that lupus you have or fibromyalgia be due to the small intestinal bacterial overgrowth you have that was caused by prior consumption of grains and sugars, and then your intermittent exposure to antibiotics as well as the herbicides in your food? So if there's no effort given to identifying causes and correcting the natural means, but instead this jump to drugs and procedures, I've lost faith in the fact in the conventional medical system providing the answers. So you'll see example after example. Statin drugs, there may be a small subpopulation who benefits from them. Non-compliant people, if your neighbor says, Ashley, I'm not going to do that diet, I'm not going to take vitamin D, I think it's stupid, that person should take Lipitor. There are some genetic variants. There's something called ApoE4. There's familial hypercholesterolemia. But the data are not clear. So it's not as if those are mandates for statin drugs. But I think it's nice to know they're there just in case. Let's say somebody with familial hypercholesterolemia has severe carotid disease and or coronary disease. I think that would be a rational use of a statin drug. But I'm talking about less than 2% of current use, meaning 98% of people who take statin drugs should not be taking them. Yet we've been told every last person should be put in it. And you've heard my colleagues say things like it should be put into drinking water, which is, of course, absurd. So the vast majority of drugs are unnecessary because we were given the wrong message from the start.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned some devices that sounded really interesting. Are these available on your website, or do you have an article on your blog about them? I'm very curious about how you're leveraging science to monitor, your own optimal health. So instead of waiting till we get sick, and then, like you said, all these procedures, you started out as a cardiologist doing procedure after procedure, and waking up to the realization that waiting till someone gets sick, you were seeing patients once they were sick, and that doesn't help people be healthy. And so you had to go, wait, I'm not going to wait till I'm sick. So now it sounds like what you're doing with all these fun devices you have at your desk is that you're monitoring your day-to-day health. So you're really practicing modern day science-based preventive medicine.
Yeah, this is the undoctored conversation now. So I introduced these devices in the undoctored. Not to say that people need to buy all of these costly devices to do this. You can pick and choose if you want to use any of these devices. But one of my favorite examples is a glucose meter. I like the Dario, and I have no reason to tell you about it. I don't have a relationship with them. I get nothing by telling you about it. But Dario makes a wonderful little blood glucose device. It's the size of your thumbnail. It plugs into your smartphone and allows you to test your blood sugars. And it comes with an app, and it tracks your blood sugars for you. But here's what I've been doing with it. And people can read about this on my Undoctored blog, my Wheat Belly blog, or the Undoctored book, and where we expand it even further in the Undoctored Inner Circle site. But doctors tell you to use glucose monitoring. They tell diabetics to monitor their fingerstick glucoses to make sure their insulin and drugs are controlling their blood sugars. So they tell them to get a blood sugar prior to a meal and then 2 hours later to make sure blood sugar comes back down. So it's just a tool to monitor diabetes. What the doctor didn't tell you is if you use that same device, same values in a little different way, you can use it to become non-diabetic and
Mm-hmm.
to massively accelerate weight loss. So he didn't tell you that if you do this instead, check a blood sugar finger stick just prior to your meal, and then 30 to 60 minutes later, where the peak of blood sugar occurs. And every time it goes up at all, go back to your diet and reduce or remove the food responsible, which will be almost always be some kind of starchy carbohydrate food, and take that out or reduce it in portion size. You do this over and over and over again, and your fasting blood sugar drops. The after meal blood sugars, of course, drop, and you lose weight at this astounding pace. And the vast majority of people with type 2 diabetes become non diabetic very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So, the same tool your doctor uses to manage your drugs can be used to get rid of the condition, but they never told you that. So that's the kind of conversation I'm encouraging people to participate in because it's so powerful. You don't need to have that glucose meter. It's useful for people who want to not be diabetic or want to accelerate their weight loss. And the smartphone device just makes it a little bit more fun and portable. That's all it does.
Does it still take your blood?
It does. Now, you may have heard the rumors that there are Apple and two other companies have devices like the Apple Watch that may have the capacity for transdermal continuous glucose monitoring. Now, that's true. Tim Cook has been showing it off. He's been wearing it, claiming that it continuously monitors his glucose. If that's true, that's a game changer, actually, because that
Mm-hmm.
means people have access to around the clock, and they'll start to realize they won't need to hear it from me. They'll realize oatmeal is incredibly destructive. They'll recognize that grains make them diabetic. So they'll learn on their own. So I love that these devices are coming out because, it wasn't that long ago. If you wanted a blood sugar or an EKG or biofeedback, you had to go to the hospital or the doctor. Now you can do it in your den or your living room or your kitchen. And people are being empowered to a degree that's never before possible. So part of my undoctored mission is to show all the nice people who are curious about these things how to apply these tools in the service of their own health and stay the heck away from the doctor.
I love it. Let's stick the heck away from these doctors. Wonderful. Oh my gosh, it has been such a pleasure having you on the show. I could talk to you for hours. This is so wonderful. When after I first went gluten free, I was talking to a friend of mine who had also followed this movement. I feel it was early on, 6 years ago. I know it was you were in it way before then, but my friend said I want to get all of my family on this, and he couldn't convince them. And I had heard an episode where you were interviewed by Jan Irving, with amazing interview. And that interview I just started sharing with people, and I said you have to listen to this. You have to listen to this. And he got his entire like cousins, aunts, uncles, like everyone in his whole family to follow the program, and the results were amazing. He had nieces with acne, skin rashes, weird red bumps on their body. His mom had edema. She's in her 70s, and she had weird edema in her legs. Within a month, completely disappeared. His dad had a huge, like, trucker's gut. You know what I mean, like a giant keg. And that was diminishing. Everyone in his whole family, it was just amazing to see the miraculous results. And that one interview, I just kept sharing it and sharing it and sharing it everywhere, because you covered so much more in this interview today, but that interview was such an eye-opener. And I hope that every interview you do, we can just affect thousands of people, and let's just tip the scales. I see it. It's really growing. I've seen it over the last 6 years. We just need to tip the scales and get the conversation to move towards 100% grain free and sugar free, and like you said, monitor blood sugar, focus on normal healthy blood sugar. It's been wonderful having you on the show. Let's, before we end today's interview, let's make sure that we cover all the websites that we want listeners to go to, which of course are going to be in the links. All these links are going to be in the show notes of today's podcast. Where would be the best place for a listener to go if they want to start following you and go down this rabbit hole with you?
For the Wheat Belly conversation, just the easiest, simplest thing to do is there's the Wheat Belly blog, and the Wheat Belly Facebook page. It's called the official Wheat Belly Facebook page. And the starting place, if you don't want the science, is the Wheat Belly 10-Day Grain Detox book. If you want that deeper experience in empowered health, how to apply devices, collaborate with other people, that's the undoctored conversation, the sum total of all the lessons learned, the Wheat Belly experience. Undoctored book, the undoctored blog, and then the undoctored circle, inner circle for the really serious follower who wants to really gain control over health and maybe want to learn even how to pass it on to their family. So I'm trying to address every level of interest and sophistication so that, as you say, we can get this kind of a message out to as many people as possible. Because I love hearing these stories, like the family just told me. I mean, that's spectacular. And imagine trying to accomplish that in the medical system. You can't do it.
No, all those people in his family who had all these different problems, they were already seeing doctors, and the
Right.
doctors were just giving them drugs and managing their symptoms, and that wasn't working. When are we going to wake up and go, what we have is not working? We need to change it.
That's
But
right.
there's so much money invested in keeping us asleep and keeping us in the status quo. So I am so thrilled that you are this wonderful voice that is helping us to come to the light and to come to the realization that we need to advocate for our own health, and we need to stop listening to the message of the mainstream media, which is paid for by the big food companies and the big pharma, and that we need to start thinking for ourselves. It has been such a pleasure having you on the show. I cannot wait to have you back.
Pleasure's been mine. Pleasure's been mine, Ashley.
Thank you. Enjoy what you heard today on your episode of the Learn True Health podcast. Did something move you, inspire you? Did you get great information that's going to change your life? Awesome. That's exactly what I'm here to do, is to help you gain your health back. Please turn around and share this. If this is something that's helped you in any way, share this with those you love. Love the Learn True Health podcast and want to support us? Awesome. You can go to takeyoursupplements.com and you can support us that way. You'll get access to amazing supplements that are just really great quality for a great price. And there'll be someone on the other end of the line to help you pick out your supplements that are right for you. That's takeyoursupplements.com, or join our membership, learntruehealth.com/join. That's another great way to support our podcast, support our movement, and you'll be supporting yourself. Gain more information, wonderful videos, wonderful trainings, and you'll also be able to share those with those you love as well. So go to learntruehealth.com/join. Want something fun for free? Go to learntruehealth.com, and right there on the front page, you'll see where you can get our free cookbook. I spent a lot of time making it, and it was so much fun. It's really delicious, healthy recipes. And you can also get our 7-day doctor course. Right there, it's 7 days of naturopathic videos sent right to your inbox, and you can learn from top naturopaths on how to gain health naturally. So that's takeyoursupplements.com for wonderful supplements. learntruehealth.com/join to join our awesome membership, which is only open for a limited time. You can get our free healthy cookbook, and you can also get for free 7 days of wonderful naturopathic videos sent to you. Just go to learntruehealth.com and you'll see it right there on the front page. Thank you so much for being a listener, and thank you for sharing and helping others. Let's spread this information and turn this ripple into a tidal wave.